There are two stories here, and until today, you have only been given one of them. The one you were given, the one you have been living inside of, turning over in your quiet moments, trying to make sense of with the information available to you, is incomplete. Not because you were not paying attention, not because you missed something obvious, but because the piece that explains everything was never given to you, was held somewhere else, in the interior of a person who was not ready to let you see it. That piece is coming forward now, and when it arrives, everything you have been trying to understand is going to suddenly make sense. Not the comfortable kind of sense that requires nothing from you, the real kind, the kind that costs something to receive, but that gives you solid ground to stand on once you have received it. Stay with me, Virgo, because this reading carries both stories, the one that explains the leaving and the one that explains the return. And you deserve to have both of them in full. Let me start at the beginning. Not your beginning of this story, the moment you became aware that something was happening, the moment the shift became undeniable. Their beginning, the internal beginning, the moment something started forming in this person that they did not know how to carry and did not know what to do with, and eventually, in the way of people who do not know what to do with what they are carrying, did the only thing that felt manageable. They left, and I want to be clear about something before I tell you why. The leaving was not about you not being enough. I feel that question living in you, have been living in you since this happened, and I want to address it directly before anything else, not as comfort designed to make you feel better, as fact. The leaving was not a verdict about your worth. It was a verdict about their readiness. Let me speak to what they were feeling when they left. Something was getting too real. That is the most honest, most direct, most accurate way I can describe what was happening in them in the period that preceded the walking away. Something between you, the specific quality of what was building, the way it was developing, the direction it was moving, was becoming more significant than they had prepared themselves for, was growing past the comfortable stage of something you can hold lightly into the territory of something that holds you. That territory frightened them, not because of anything you did, because of what they understood the territory would require of them. Real things require real presence. Real connections require real vulnerability. And vulnerability for this person is not a simple or comfortable or easily available state. It has a history in them, a history of having been open and having that openness used against them or dismissed or simply not met at the level at which it was offered. So when they felt the real beginning to form between you, the instinct that fired was not move toward this. It was protect yourself from this. And protection for someone who has learned to protect themselves by creating distance looked like leaving. I want to stay with this for a moment because I feel it is the most important thing in this entire reading, and I do not want to move past it before it has fully landed. They did not leave because you were too much. They left because what they felt about you was too much for them, for where they were, for the version of themselves that existed at the time of the leaving, which was a version that did not yet have the capacity to stand in the full weight of something real without instinctively moving away from it. The leaving was self-protection, misdirected, ultimately unsuccessful, but genuinely motivated by fear rather than by any absence of feeling. In fact, and this is the part I need you to hear clearly, the more they felt, the faster they moved. The intensity of the leaving was proportionate to the intensity of the feeling. They did not leave because you meant nothing. They left because you meant everything, and that was the most frightening thing that had ever happened to them. Let me speak to what happened after they walked away, because the leaving did not produce what it was supposed to produce: protection, distance, the comfortable numbness of someone who has successfully removed themselves from something that was getting too close. It produced the opposite. Without the proximity of you, without the actual daily available to reach reality of you in their life, something became very clear that had not been entirely clear while they were still inside it. The way certain things are difficult to see when you are standing too close and then become suddenly, painfully, unmistakably visible the moment you step back. What became visible was the size of what they walked away from, not in the abstract, in the specific, physical, this is what my days feel like without this in them way. Every space you had occupied in the texture of their life announced itself through its emptiness. Every moment that would have been different with you present became a small, recurring, impossible to ignore reminder of the choice they had made. The protection was not working. You were not further away. You were everywhere. The protection was not working. You were not further away. You were everywhere. Let me speak to what the people around them witnessed during the separation, because this person did not navigate the time away invisibly. The people who loved them were present for it, were watching, were forming their own understanding of what was happening, even when they were not being told the full version. They saw the restlessness, the specific quality of someone who has made a decision they are not at peace with trying to perform peace with it. The slightly too emphatic statements about moving forward, the overextension into new activities and new connections that had the texture of filling space rather than actually wanting what was being filled with. The moments of quiet that arrived without warning in the middle of ordinary things, where this person disappeared briefly into somewhere that was not the room they were standing in. The people around them did not press, but they understood. And at least one of them, the one who is most honest with this person, the one who earns the right to say the thing others do not say, eventually asked. Not directly, something gentler than direct, something like, "Are you sure this is what you want?" The answer was a pause, long enough to be its own answer. The person who asked did not push further, but they filed what the pause contained. And they have been watching since to see when it finally became something that moved rather than something that simply sat. It is moving now. For some of you, they tried to convince themselves the leaving was right. They built a case, assembled the practical arguments, the timing concerns, the reasonable explanations for why the distance was the correct choice. They shared some of these arguments with the people around them. They delivered them with enough conviction that the people around them accepted them as the truth of the situation. They did not accept them as the truth of the situation. They knew, in the part of themselves that does not respond to argument, that the case they were building was a structure designed to contain something that would not be contained. That every argument they made for why the leaving made sense was an argument they were making against what they actually felt. You cannot argue yourself out of something that lives in the body. They tried. The body won. For others of you, they did not try to convince themselves. They simply endured and moved through the days after the leaving with the specific, grim, one foot in front of the other quality of someone who has made a decision they already suspect was wrong, but are not yet ready to reverse, because reversing it would require admitting the mistake. And admitting the mistake would require standing in the full vulnerability of returning to something they ran from, which is, as we have established, the thing they are most afraid of. For others, still, there was someone else, a deliberate attempt to redirect what they felt in a direction that did not carry the same risk. To find in someone or something new enough of what you provided that the specific ache of your absence could be managed into something more bearable. It did not work. Nothing was you, and everything reminded them of you anyway. Does this feel like something you have been sensing, Virgo? Have you felt the specific quality of someone who left but did not arrive anywhere? Have you felt your own name living in the space between where they went and where they actually wanted to be? Let me know in the comments. Tell me how long the separation has been. Tell me if you felt somewhere underneath everything that the leaving was never the whole story. Now let me tell you about the return. Because there is a return. That is the second story. The one that has been forming in this person with a slowness that is proportionate to the significance of what it requires them to do. What it requires is not dramatic, it is something much harder than dramatic. It requires them to be honest about why they left, about what the leaving cost them, about what the time away revealed that the time inside the connection did not, about what they understand now that they did not understand before. And it requires them to come back without the guarantee of what they will find. That is the specific courage this return requires. Not the easy courage of returning to something that has been waiting patiently and will receive them without question. The harder courage of returning without knowing whether the door is still open, whether you have moved, whether what existed between you is still available, or whether the leaving closed something that cannot be reopened. They do not know which it is, and they are coming back anyway. Let me speak to what changed in them, what produced the shift from enduring the absence to deciding to do something about it. Something happened, a moment. Not a dramatic external event necessarily, though for some of you it was that. For others, it was an internal moment. A specific, quiet, this is enough quality of having been without you for long enough that the cost of the pride that was keeping them away finally exceeded the cost of the vulnerability that coming back requires. The calculation changed. And when the calculation changed, the decision changed not gradually, with the specific suddenness of something that has been building for a long time and finally tips one morning or one evening or one ordinary moment in the middle of a day that was supposed to be about something else entirely. The calculus of continuing to stay away became impossible to justify. They decided, and the decision, once made, has not wavered. Inhale. I want to speak to what the return is going to look like, because it is not going to look like what you might imagine if you have been picturing it. It is not going to be a grand, orchestrated, perfectly delivered reappearance that resolves everything in one sweep. It is going to be smaller than that and more real. A reach, a message or a call or an appearance in your vicinity that is technically explainable as something else, but that carries underneath the surface explanation the energy of what it actually is. Which is someone who has been working up to this for a while, finally doing it, finally saying something, finally putting themselves in the position where the conversation they have been avoiding becomes the conversation they are in. When it comes, you will feel it immediately, not because of what is said, because of the quality of the saying, the specific, unmistakable energy of someone who has rehearsed this moment many times in their private imagination and is now standing inside the actual version of it with all the feelings that the imagined version could never fully prepare them. For they are going to be nervous. Let that nervousness tell you what it tells you. They are going to be nervous. Let that nervousness tell you what it tells you. I want to speak to something about the nervousness specifically because it matters and it carries information. This person is not someone who is typically nervous. They move through their life with a quality of self possession that most people in their orbit would describe, if asked, as confidence, not arrogance confidence. The earned, grounded, I know who I am variety that comes from having been tested and found capable. The kind that does not require external validation to sustain itself because its roots are deep enough. They are nervous about reaching out to you. Let that land. A person who is not typically nervous about you, about your reception, about what they will find when they finally say the thing they have been not saying for however long this has been, about whether the version of you they are returning to is the version they left, or whether the time has produced someone who has reorganized their life in a way that does not have space for what is being offered. The nervousness is not weakness. It is evidence of how much this matters. People are nervous about things that matter. Things that do not matter do not produce nervousness. They produce casualness. They produce the ease of someone who has nothing at stake. This person has everything at stake in their estimation, in the private accounting of what they value and what losing it has cost them. And they are coming to you with that stake visible. Now, what do you do with this? That is the question sitting at the center of this reading, and I am not going to pretend it has a simple answer, because it does not. The why they left and the why they are coming back are both real. The fear that produced the leaving is real. The growth that is producing the return is real. And your own experience of the period between what the leaving cost you, what you have built in the time since, who you have become in the absence of them is also real and also matters and also has a say in what happens next. You are not required to receive them as though the leaving did not happen. You are also not required to close the door simply because it once closed on you. What you are required to do is know what you actually want, not what you wanted before the leaving, what you want now from this version of yourself, looking at this version of them in full possession of everything. The entire arc of this story has shown you about both of you. That knowing is yours and only yours. What I will say is this: the person coming back to you is not exactly the person who left. Something happened in the leaving. Not just to you, to them. The time away, which did not provide the relief it was supposed to provide, did something else instead. It taught them something they could not have been taught while they were still inside the connection, still managing the fear of it from within the thing they were afraid of. It taught them what losing you actually feels like. And what losing you actually feels like is the thing that could not be explained to them in advance, could not be communicated through any words or any warning, could only be known through the direct, unavoidable experience of it. They know it now. The person returning carries that knowledge. And knowledge of that kind, the kind that lives in the body, that arrived through loss rather than through reasoning, that cannot be unfelt, changes how a person approaches what they previously took for granted. They are not taking you for granted. Not anymore. If this reading touched something real in you today, please share it with a Virgo who needs to hear this. And leave me a comment below. Tell me how long this has been your story. Tell me what the leaving felt like and whether you felt the return before this reading named it. Tell me what is sitting in your chest right now as you come to the end of this. I read every single word you share with me, every comment, every story. I carry your energy long after this reading ends. Until next time, Virgo. They left because what they felt was too large for who they were then. They are coming back because they have grown into it. The question is whether you are still standing in the same place. Only you know the answer to that.